What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, talking today about Mortal Shell, because this game is essentially like an indie version of Dark Souls 4, but I mean that as a compliment. This genre, these games, they're just so hard and complicated, and also just so addictive because they manage to have crazy boss fights, really deep mythos, and so much in there that makes you actually love being killed again and again. But Mortal Shell, it tries to do some stuff that feels like a step beyond Dark Souls. Now I want to talk about this game, but first let's break down what this is. This is essentially like a beta test. It's sort of like a demo that the developers have given me, which is essentially the first hour of the game. It's the opening dungeon and the first boss. And so there's absolutely no spoilers in this. In fact, there's pretty much no cutscenes. You kind of just show up with no explanation and have to try and find your way through this big confusing world. But this is kind of what I like about it. Mortal Shell on its surface explains pretty much nothing. It doesn't tell you what you are, how these things exist, or really anything beyond the buttons itself. You get like this 60-second tutorial that teaches you how to dodge, how to block, and how to harden. So since we're talking about combat, let's dive deep on this because it is definitely the best part of the game itself. So the way this works is essentially like a combination of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and also Dark Souls itself. And what I mean is that basically, as you see enemies, you're trying to take them down. You need to try and hack and slash or use magic to beat them up. And as you start hitting them, you realize that this has almost a delicious squishiness to it. These enemies, they actually take damage. If you hit them really hard, they'll stagger. If you hit them at the apex of their swing, sometimes it'll just knock you off balance. There's this interesting like ebb and flow of momentum. And what I like about this is during my time with this demo, I played a lot, kind of exploring every single nook and cranny and trying to get every single one of the hidden unlockables. And yes, I did manage to find every single freaking upgrade in this, but I really noticed that the game encourages you to learn the enemies more than just upgrade yourself. I can actually run through this entire thing now with absolutely no special effects because it's just so easy now that I understand how these enemies are going to hit. If they're swinging their blade at a particular time, I can possibly knock them over or maybe do double damage. And that's what I like, is that this game really encourages you to try and figure out how to handle each of the enemies. But this is of course also a matter of what shell you're wearing. So the major element of Mortal Shell that's trying to be big and different is the shells. These are like, well, your character is kind of like a ghostly squishy dude. It's like a naked guy running around. But if you find these particular corpses, you can possess them and kind of wear them like a costume. And since you are actually picking up what was once a living creature, they're not just puppets. They have memories, they have skills, and by equipping these shells, you get their own special perks. Within this demo, I had two separate shells I could play with, but this guy, I absolutely love him. His main special ability is like this shadowy teleport instead of a dash. So instead of like rolling out of the way of enemies, I could actually phase through their hits. It takes a lot of practice to get good with the timing, but once I got really skilled at trying to make sure that I would phase through their particular attacks, I was able to clear entire zones without being touched. I mean, this game really encourages just learning the elements. It's not so much about making sure your weapon is plus a million damage, it's more about just learning all of the ingredients of a proper attack. Now this goes on to something that's definitely more unique in this, and why I referenced Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which is that in this game you can actually die as your shell. When you're running around and trying to battle people, you're going to occasionally make some mistakes. If they fell a fatal blow against you, it will knock you out of your body and you go back to being this little naked squishy guy. Now when this happens, you can choose to keep trying to fight as your little squishy self, or you can try and run back and jump back into your shell and get a second chance. So what this does is when you climb back into your body, you now have a full health bar again. So you kind of get a chance to have 2 lives for every single time you leave the safe zone. So as you're exploring, you can be kind of dangerous, or if you lose lose one of your lives, maybe you can choose to go back and try and restore your health at a checkpoint before you dive deeper into these dungeons. I like this mechanic because it definitely makes it where I became more careful and also more willing to try and throw myself into danger. I wasn't so paranoid about trying to learn every enemy's mechanics because I realized that even if I made a particularly bad flaw, I knew that I wouldn't just be completely one-shot. Now, just like Dark Souls, there is of course a detriment to dying, which comes in the form of losing your tar. Tar in this universe is basically like what souls were in Dark Souls. It basically is your currency for trying to purchase new upgrades and stuff, and there's even like a shop you can visit to buy a bunch of health potions. The main thing that struck me about this game, though, isn't just how fun the combat is, which is exceedingly good. It's definitely that this is trying to feel almost like a step beyond the mechanics we're typically used to. Now in this, I only have 2 of the shells. I believe that they said there's going to be 4 total shells in the game itself, and it seems like this game is very much leaning into the idea of pick the way you play, making it so you can actually upgrade that character's talent trees to do extra special stuff. So as I was playing this, since I kept clearing out these dungeons again and again, I got enough points to upgrade my character's maximum skill trees, or everything that was in the demo, and it gave me the ability of like, I could absorb poison, so instead of being hurt by certain detrimental effects, instead it would restore my strength. I also got the ability that I have this really big stamina bar. If I get hit extra hard, I have a 20% chance of, instead of taking that damage out of my health, it would instead just hurt my stamina. And stuff like this, it feels like they're trying to think of things in a much more dynamic fashion, because as much as I love a lot of these action RPGs, a lot of them are kind of simplistic in that they're just based on stats. It just comes to a matter of, you have to be good at the game, of course, but at the end of the day, you can just theoretically grind yourself up. You can just buy 1,000,000 health points by stockpiling every single soul. So I kind of enjoy in this game that they more of lean into the idea of being good with a weapon is more important than just the weapon itself. With all this positive being said, I do want to highlight 3 issues I've had with this, which is, the first one is that at times, the AI could be incredibly basic. These enemies, like, I had a chance to learn all their ins and outs, their strengths and weaknesses, but some of them, they didn't seem to fully understand the environment. It seemed like they were fully programmed to try and take you down, but if there was anything on the ground or any amount of verticality, they would practically break. I've seen enemies get stuck on tombstones or moss, or at one point I've seen people just walk on stairways and not understand that I was below them, so they just eternally swipe into nothingness. The game certainly seems like it's built on a very 2D plane, so as you get into more dynamic areas, the enemies, even if they are strong, get a little bit stupid. But to go with this, I think that there's some other technical problems. This is obviously a beta, and the reason I'm putting this in the video is to try and tell the developers, I think that there is some problems with how the game runs. During the course of my roughly 3 to 4 hours of playing this today, I have actually had about 7 hard crashes. Times where I was attempting to boot the game up, or something would happen on the load screens where the game would crash, and it would actually crash so hard I would have to force quit out. Now I will say this, the game is constantly doing some sort of autosave. Every time I've ever crashed in the game, when I rebooted it, I would be in the exact same spot, or I would be in a safe zone and still have all my tar intact. So it's not like dying or these hard crashes completely destroyed my save file. They were just very, very annoying. The final detriment is just one that kind of goes into this more as a warning, which is that I was serious when I said that this game does not explain a thing. There is stuff like a hardened system. You can turn yourself essentially into stone for a moment and absorb one attack. This is a very, very complicated system that's not exactly the same as blocking. It's definitely something that takes a lot of practice, and the game doesn't tell you that. The game doesn't explain upgrades. It doesn't even explain the items in the game. You actually have to eat and drink every single thing you find to learn what it does, which meant that at times I was eating poison meat off the ground and stuff because I really had no other way of learning this stuff. The game has a bit of a steep learning curve, but but if you've played previous Dark Souls games, I do think that this is something that can be easy and accessible. I do kind of have concerns, though, to somebody who tries this as their first Soulsborne style project. I do think that the learning curve might be rather steep. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts about what's good or bad about this game. What do you think? Are you excited about this game? Have you gotten a chance to jump into the beta? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, be sure to do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Also, give this video a like. I don't know if I said that. Like and comment. It helps the algorithm. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.